I'm 54 years old. I've spent most of my life being the kind of woman people describe as steady. I married young, raised 2 kids, kept a neat home, and tried to be the kind of wife and mother others could count on. I believed love was about patience and compromise, about staying even when it felt easier to leave. But sometimes staying becomes a way of disappearing. I never thought something like this could happen to me. Please don't make the same mistake I did. It was a Saturday evening in early spring, the kind of evening where the air still holds a chill, but you can sense that warmth is on its way. We had a few friends over for dinner, nothing fancy, just grilled chicken, salad, and a few bottles of red wine. My husband Dan was his usual self, laughing too loudly, telling the same story about his high school football days to anyone who would listen. I sat at the edge of the patio, sipping my wine, smiling when I needed to, nodding when appropriate. That's when I noticed Paul watching me. Paul had been Dan's friend since college. A quiet man. Divorced. No kids. A little withdrawn. Always arriving late and leaving early. We'd never spoken much beyond polite greetings and the occasional small talk at gatherings. But that night he lingered. I caught him looking at me while Dan talked about their old road trip to New Mexico. His eyes didn't dart away like most men's would when they're caught. Instead, he held my gaze for a moment, steady, searching before, finally looking down at his drink. Something about that look unsettled me, not in a bad way. It was curious, like he saw something in me I hadn't shown in a long time. As the night went on, and the conversation got louder, more chaotic, I slipped inside to clear the plates. The kitchen was dim, lit only by the under-cabinet lights. I moved slowly, methodically, rinsing, stacking, rinsing, stacking, letting the noise from the patio fade behind me. I didn't hear him come in. Need a hand? Paul's voice was low, even, like he'd been waiting for the right moment. I turned and found him leaning against the doorframe, sleeves rolled to his elbows, glass still in hand. "Oh," I said, startled. "No, it's fine. I've got it." He stepped into the room anyway, set his glass down near the sink. "You always do," he said. That made me pause. I turned off the faucet and looked at him. "What's that supposed to mean?" He shrugged, but not like he didn't care. More like he didn't know if he should say what was on his mind. "I just mean you're always the one doing everything, hosting, cleaning up, keeping things together." I smiled a bit too tightly. "That's what wives do, Paul." He gave a soft laugh, not unkind. "No, that's what you do." The silence stretched between us. Not awkward exactly. Heavy. Real. I looked away. Started wiping down the counter. "Well, someone has to." He stepped a little closer. "Why does it have to be you?" I didn't have an answer for that. Not one that would sound convincing, not even to myself. After a long pause, he spoke again, quieter this time. "Do you ever get tired of pretending?" My breath caught a little in my throat. I wanted to tell him he was wrong, that I wasn't pretending, that I was happy, but the words wouldn't come, because part of me, the part I rarely let speak, whispered that maybe he wasn't wrong at all. I turned to face him again, my hands still damp from the sink. "Why are you asking me this?" He took another step, close now but still not crossing. "Any lines?" "Because I see you, Maggie." I hadn't heard my name spoken like that in a long time, not with tenderness, not with weight. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like someone's wife or someone's mother. I just felt like me. From the patio, someone called Dan's name, and the spell broke. Paul stepped back, picked up his glass and offered a quiet smile. "I'll let you finish," he said. "Good night." He turned and walked out, leaving me standing in the kitchen, heart beating faster than it should have. hands still wet, and wondering what exactly had just happened, and why it felt like something inside me had quietly shifted. The next morning, I told myself it was nothing. I made coffee, folded laundry, and listened to Dan drone on about needing to trim the hedges before the HOA sent another passive-aggressive email. Life went on like it always did, tidy, predictable, safe. But somewhere inside me, something hummed. A vibration I couldn't quite ignore. Paul's words from the night before replayed in my mind as I moved through my day. Do you ever get tired of pretending? I hadn't thought of myself as someone who pretended. I lived a good life by most standards, a decent marriage, 2 grown kids with jobs and apartments of their own, a home with a mortgage nearly paid off. But when I really let myself sit in that question, I felt something uncomfortable rise up in me. Yes, I was tired. 2 days passed before I saw Paul again. Dan invited him over to help move a heavy bookshelf in the garage. I stayed out of the way, pretending to be busy reorganizing the linen closet. But I heard them laughing, the thud of furniture being dragged, the occasional grunt of exertion. I tried to act normal, but when I passed through the hallway later, Paul was there alone. He stood by the front door, keys in hand. He saw me, gave a polite nod. "Thanks for the coffee," he said. I paused. "Did you get any cake?" There was some leftover from Saturday. He gave a half smile. "No, I think Dan kept it for himself." I gestured toward the kitchen. "There's a slice left. I'll wrap it up." I walked ahead of him. Too quickly, maybe. Like I needed to do something with my hands. I found the cake, opened the drawer for foil, but my fingers trembled just slightly. He stepped beside me. Close again. Always close, but never too close. "You've been on my mind," he said quietly. I stopped wrapping the cake. "I'm sorry," I murmured. "I'm not sure I know what to say to that." "You don't have to say anything." I looked at him then, really looked at him. He wasn't a flashy man. His hair was more grey than brown now, and his eyes had that weary kindness you only get from life bruising you a little. But there was something about the way he looked at me, not like I was his best friend's wife, but like I was real, like he was seeing a version of me I'd forgotten existed. I finally said, "Paul, this is dangerous." He nodded. "I know. That's why I waited to say anything." "But you're saying something now." He didn't answer right away. He just let the silence between us fill up with all the things neither of us had the courage to put into words. And then, after a long beat, he said, "Because I can't keep pretending either." I felt something twist in my chest. I didn't know what this was or where it would go. I only knew that it had already started, not in some reckless way, but quietly, like a tide you hadn't noticed rising until your feet were already wet. That night, Dan snored beside me in bed, oblivious. I stared at the ceiling, listening to the rhythm of his breath, wondering what it meant to be loyal, wondering when exactly love had turned into duty, wondering what it would cost to feel something again, and whether the cost would be worth it. The days that followed felt like walking. A tightrope, except I didn't know which way was forward anymore. I went about my routines, groceries, bills, a phone call with my daughter about her new promotion, all the pieces of a life that on the surface seemed intact. But underneath, I was unraveling in slow motion. I didn't see Paul for a week, and maybe that was for the best. I told myself I needed space, clarity, but clarity never comes when you want it to. It sneaks in during the quietest moments, like when you're folding towels and suddenly realize how long it's been since someone looked at you like you mattered. Then, one rainy afternoon, he texted, "I'll be near your neighborhood later. Could we talk?" I stared at the message longer than I should have. My thumb hovered over the screen. "Yes, just for a bit." We agreed to meet at the park down the road, Not the main entrance, but the smaller back trail, where no one really goes unless they're walking a dog or trying to be alone. I parked under the tall pines, heart thudding like I was 16 again. The rain had slowed to a drizzle and the air smelled of wet leaves and bark. Paul was already there, leaning against his car. He looked tired, the way people do when they've been holding something inside too long. We didn't speak at first. We just walked. The trail curved gently through the woods, soft earth muffling our footsteps. The only sounds were the birds and the occasional raindrop falling through the branches. Finally, he said, "I'm not trying to cause problems, Maggie." I swallowed. "I know. But I can't ignore this anymore. And I don't think you can either." I stopped walking. "Paul, what exactly is this to you?" He turned to face me. His voice was steady but low. "It's not about wanting what I shouldn't have. It's about seeing someone who's been invisible for too long. It's about wanting you to remember. You're still alive." I felt tears prick the corners of my eyes, not because I was sad, but because I hadn't realized how much I needed someone to say that. "I don't know what to do," I whispered. "You don't have to decide anything right now," he said. "I just needed you to know that someone sees you, that someone cares." His words weren't grand. They weren't laced with promises or pressure, but they cracked something open inside me. We sat on a bench under a canopy of trees, the rain barely touching us through the thick leaves. For a long time, we said nothing, and somehow that silence felt like the most honest thing in the world. He didn't touch me. He didn't try to kiss me. He just sat there beside me, quietly present. And in that moment, I felt something I hadn't felt in years safe. Not because someone was protecting me, but because someone was finally seeing me. The real me. The woman beneath the labels, the chores, the smiles at dinner parties. When he finally stood to leave, he said, "Whatever happens next, just be true to yourself. That's all." I watched him walk back to his car, hands in his pockets, head bowed slightly as the rain started to fall again. And I sat there alone, heart beating in unfamiliar rhythms, realizing that sometimes the hardest part of waking up is admitting you've been asleep. The morning after our walk in the woods, I stood in front of the bathroom mirror longer than usual. I didn't look different, same face, same lines, same tired eyes, but something beneath the surface had shifted. I wasn't just brushing my hair or applying mascara. I was staring at a woman I'd been ignoring for years. That day I didn't clean the kitchen. I didn't fold the towels or vacuum the living room like I usually did on Sundays. Instead, I sat on the back porch with a cup of tea and watched the breeze dance through the trees. I let myself be still, let the quiet settle, let myself feel everything I had been too busy or too afraid to feel. Dan came out eventually. He stood in the doorway, squinting at the sun. "You okay?" "Yeah," I said. "Just thinking." He nodded, like that was enough, and wandered back inside. It struck me then how little we really saw each other anymore. How much of our marriage had become muscle memory, like we were dancing a routine to music that had stopped playing long ago. That night, I waited until he was done watching the news, and I turned off the TV. "Maggie," he said, confused. "We need to talk." The words came out steady, but my heart raced. I didn't plan to confess every detail. Paul hadn't crossed a line, and neither had I, not really. But I needed to be honest with myself, with Dan, because I couldn't keep living in half-light. "I don't know when it happened," I said slowly, "but somewhere along the way, I started to feel like I disappeared." Dan looked at me, brow furrowed. "What do you mean?" "I mean, I've been holding this house together, holding us together, and I'm not even sure who I am anymore. I'm tired, Dan, and I feel alone." His expression shifted, a flicker of something vulnerable passing through his eyes. I didn't know you felt that way. That's the thing, I said softly. You didn't ask. We sat in silence for a long time. Finally he spoke. Is there someone else? It would have been easy to lie, to say no and spare us both the discomfort. But I shook my head slowly. There isn't, not like that. That there's someone who reminded me what it feels like to be seen. His jaw clenched, and for a second, I thought he might storm out. But instead he sighed. Maybe I stopped seeing you too, he said. That night we didn't fight. We didn't cry. We just sat on opposite ends of the couch, like strangers who had once been lovers, trying to remember how it all used to feel. The days that followed weren't dramatic. There were no ultimatums, no slammed doors, just slow, necessary conversations. We agreed to counseling. We started asking questions we hadn't asked in years. Questions like, what do you want now? And what would make you feel alive again? And as for Paul, he drifted back into the background gracefully. He never asked for more than I could give. He never pressured, never pried. Just one quiet text a week later. Whatever choice you make, I hope it brings you peace. I never replied. Somewhere deep inside, I knew that what Paul gave me wasn't about romance or scandal. It was a mirror, a brief glimpse of a life I'd forgotten I deserved. And as I sit here now, months later, looking out the same window with the same teacup in hand, I'm not sure where the road will lead, but I know I'm walking it awake this time. Eyes open, heart open. I never thought something like this could happen to me. That maybe it needed.